Hi, I'm Ian Galloway with NXP Semiconductor. We're here with the drone program. Follow along with this series of tutorials at hovergames.com. All right, in this section, it's a first step. We're going to prepare the arms and the motors, the motor mounts. So you'll need to get the 4 carbon fiber arms out of your kit, the 4 motors, and this package that includes the carbon fiber plates and all the spacers that are needed. So we'll open this up first. And those are the spacers. You can see what they look like. And then the motor mounts and other long 2.5 millimeter screws are here. All right. Okay. So first thing, we'll pick one of the motors. You notice there's some that are clockwise and some are counterclockwise. The silver ones, the ones with the silver tips here, are clockwise rotation. And it doesn't really matter. All we're doing is preparing these arms for mounting. So in the next step, we'll take care of making sure they go in the right place. So we start just by taking one of the motor mounts. Oh, we have to get the small screws. So here are the small screws. You know, we provide actually some extra short versions of these screws because you have to make sure you're using the short versions because it's possible, it's not likely, but it is possible that with longer ones they'll contact the back of the motor. So here we go, just assemble it. It's you put one screw through, and you can even thread it on by hand to get started. And do that for all 4 locations with the motor being centered. Now, actually, good point. You don't want the wires coming off the side. You actually want them coming off of the end, the short end. There, so we'll put that on like this. See it lined up that way. Get a screw in, started. There we go. And then you can screw it in all the way. You don't want to over tighten. That's the right screwdriver. Okay. Just snug them up at first until you get all the 4 screws in place. And it's always good practice just to snug up the screws first before tightening them down tight. To be extra safe, extra careful, if you have the opportunity to use something like Loctite or a little bit of cyanoacrylate glue, if you're worried about them vibrating out, these should be checked regularly when you're building, after flying. But for now, let's get these in place. We'll just hand tighten. Don't over tighten, but you can snug them up pretty good. All right, so we mounted motor onto that plate. Let's do that for the other 3 motors. Okay, now that we have all 4 motors assembled on these plates, first I want to give you a little bit of advice. There's lots of screws here. You are going to drop something, so make sure you're in a nice, tidy area, and so when you do drop a screw, you'll be able to find it on the ground. After these are tightened up, so you just snug these up, you don't go crazy on them. Just make sure the motor spins freely. There's nothing that's dragging. You haven't used the wrong size screws, so they're catching on the motor. All right? And then the next step is we take these little spacers. So we'll work with one at a time. Take these little spacers, second plate, and these long screws. So I'm going to put a long screw down from the top. Oh yeah, notice that the wires are coming out the short end, right, as we talked about before. Okay, so we get 4 screws slid into the top plate. We put these little saddle pieces in place on both sides. Oops. Okay, we put both saddle places in place, and then the top saddle piece. And then another plate. Sometimes you got to wiggle things a little bit to get them to line up, of course. All right, so you can see here the screws push through. So we're all lined up. And then we've got these locking nuts. So there's a little bit of nylon lock on one end. And you can use, I have this tool, but if you use the Hootie wrench that comes with the kit, and just tighten these up loosely for now, because we're going to want to slide them on the arms in a second. So there's a flat side and a round side to these nuts. And the flat side goes against the carbon fiber. All right, so just not too tight. I think I over-tightened these ones, actually. And you want to be able to get a little bit of separation there. You'll be able to tell because what we're going to do next is sliding this carbon fiber rod in. And you want the leads from the motor to be facing outward. So this is going to be the end of the rod. I'll just show you. We should be loose enough so you can slide in the rod and give it a bit of space here, maybe about the same width as these spacers. Give it about that much on the end, and that'll avoid being right at the end and crushing the carbon fiber rod. It shouldn't happen, but just in case. So now we've got, now we just tighten this a little bit. Get the right screw here. Oops, next size up. Okay, so I'm going to tighten a bit, tighten the other one. And again, I think it's wise to do this in stages. Just snug them all up first and then go around one more time, just gently tightening them again in sequence. Sort of good practice when you're tightening a series of bolts that hold things up to go around a couple of times. Okay, that's tight. Hard to get it in there. Okay, that's tight. Oops. Okay. Great. Now we're going to do the same thing for all the other ones. Okay, I wanted to show you one other option because, on the first one, we screwed the screws down from the top and had the bolts on the bottom. And there's a little bit of controversy, dialogue going on in here. Some people prefer to actually assemble it from the screw heads on the bottom and the nuts on top. The reasoning is that this sort of assembly stays together by itself. So you can kind of get this all ready, and then if you ever have to work on the motor, you don't quite have to take as much apart. So if you want to, you can put the screws up from the bottom and the nuts on top, and that's really up to you. It won't hurt anything, and you might find it's nicer that way. There you go. Once you get it aligned there. There we go. Okay, and nuts on top. I'll do one. Two different ways, same result. There we go. And they both look good. So like that or like that. Okay, so now we've assembled all four. I thought just to show you, here's the one with the nuts facing up, and here's one with the nuts facing down. I do personally, I find this a little bit nicer because when you do take it apart, the bottom part of the assembly stays together. So now we've got all four. You can see these black ones are the counterclockwise versions. You know that, or sorry, actually they're clockwise. You know that because when you hold the nut, it tightens on, and that's what you want, as it's going in the direction you want it to. It should tighten the nut. So these are the counterclockwise versions here. And next, grab the extension cables. These are 300 millimeter extension cables, and we're gonna feed each one, connect it on the end here first, and then we're gonna feed it up through the carbon fiber rod of the drone. So this new frame is called the LJI X4, and it's really nice with all the rugged, stiff carbon fiber components that are included. All right, so we just feed that in gently. One thing you want to keep in mind is, these connectors are going to be hidden inside the arm, and that means you really can't see them. You want to make that corner kind of nice and smooth. But what you don't want to do, you don't want to be pulling on these wires because you might find you disconnect it somewhere inside the arm. All right, so we're going to then put all of the extension wires through the arms, and that'll be us finished with the arm assembly. And we'll move on to the next step. All right, now we're going to assemble the landing gear to the bottom plate. So you'll have to get these pieces out of the kit, which is the T-foot and the leg, these little black screws, and then of the two plates, one is the top and one is the bottom. The easiest way to tell which one is the bottom is there are these holes here, and they correspond with the tops. Even though there's no hole in there, I think you could run, if you need to drill that out, you could run a wire down. So they're going to go on here like that. So that's the top plate. The other thing I'll show you about these plates is, for front and rear, I guess you could do anything you wanted, but I'm going to pick that this little notch is on both of them, and we'll consider that the front of the drone. All right? So start by assembling the legs together, and these screws are already in place. All you have to do is loosen them off a little bit, these T connectors. I will say the T connectors are a little bit fragile when you're crashing or having a hard land. And so what we thought we would do is we actually found some alternative, more rugged ones that you can 3D print. And we've made our own version of that. We pointed to some that already exist, and then we made our own version of a little bit more rugged version of this that's kind of a triangular shape, and it seems to hold up a lot better for hard landings. These are good. It's just that they, when you're learning and you have a few really rough landings, it's possible you might get a little crack along here. So keep an eye on that. The other thing you can do to strengthen this, and we recommend that, was put a zip tie around here, and that'll help keep it all together and avoid it from cracking if you come down really hard on one corner. All right, so we just assemble the leg like this. We'll do it for the other one now too. And all we're doing is loosening off the screws and sliding the leg in. It doesn't really matter, but I kind of I can make them the same so that the bolts are facing the same way. That's just a little bit of neatness, that's all. All right. Okay. And then the last step is we mount these on the bottom plate. So we'll use these black screws. Get the right size driver. We have hex wrenches that we provide in the kit. All right, so Let's see the circle, and the legs aim outward like that. And I guess I'll do this with my left hand. I'll put a screw through. And just snug this up loose to begin with. Until we get all four lined up and in place. So this bottom plate is where all of the power components are going to go. Now we're just showing you how to do one method, the one that we feel works. But you know, it's your drone. You can assemble it any way you like. We like this idea of keeping it neat and tidy and all the components inboard, but some people like having the ESCs, the motor controllers, just zip tied to the arms out there. The next step after this one is we're going to install the power distribution board and the motor controllers. So it's very easy, modular, step-by-step, pretty straightforward assembly. It's only 4 screws. Now this is going to get a little tall. I'm trying to give you a good camera angle. And now once this is assembled, it's up in the air, and you can see how tall the drone's going to be. One nice thing about this kit is they do give you extra screws. As I said before, you're likely to drop a screw at some point, or a nut, and the kit generally has 1 extra screw and nut when they're provided. That's nice to have. All right, so there's the landing gear assembled on the bottom plate. Now it's a little bit fragile at this point, so be careful with it. You know, you don't want to, there's no structural stability up top. So there's our top plate. Okay, now we're going to install the power distribution board. In the kit, there's both a one without any connector soldered to it, and then we provide this one with pre-soldered connectors. So that makes it really easy to plug in your motors and anything else that you want to pull power off. You just get the 3.5 millimeter bullet connectors that plug in here. So this board you don't need at all. You can save it for later if you want to hardwire something. What you do want is the package that this board comes with. It comes with these little black nylon parts, and so you're going to want to use those to mount this other board. Now the Git book, nxp.gitbook.io/HoverGames, shows, I think, a slightly different way. I think they put them down through the top here. I like this method. It's not super critical, but I'll show you what I do. Again, I'm going to mount this so that this is the board we're mounting. We're going to mount it so it's square, but it can potentially mount diagonally. I think, you know, there's a few ways you could do this. Right now we're finding that mounting it square works out pretty well. So from the bottom, I take one of these and I push it up from the bottom. Take another one, screw that on top, and do that for the 4 locations, 4 corner locations. And I'm not tightening them too tight because you want to leave them a little bit loose so the board can, the alignment with the board holes is easy enough. It can wiggle, a little bit of movement there. Okay. So we get those on loose first. Now, the other thing is there's this tail, and that's where the battery the battery plug doesn't plug in here. Actually, there's a power module that plugs in here. So what's going to happen is actually we'll put this in the back. It'll go forward, and then the battery module will snake back around from the front. The little notch here is the front of the board. So Let me see if I can squeeze it down there and put this on those posts, which are just a little bit loose on purpose. Okay, we got 3 out of the 4. There we go. Okay, now you can tighten those up a little bit. The nylon seems to be pretty good at not backing off with vibration, but you don't want to over tighten them because you can easily strip this. So I'm putting the nuts on top. And really, this is all there is to mounting the power distribution board. There we go. In our next section, we're going to put the motor controllers on now. All right, so that's all there is to the power distribution board. It provides power for different things to plug into, including these motor controllers, which we'll do next. All right, this next section will add on the rails, the mounting rails, and you can see there's a front plate for camera. They use countersunk screws, and then these other, they're sort of grommet with hoops on it. They're going to mount on the bottom plate in these spots here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I kind of went ahead here and pushed them on. I actually, this is the way it shows you how to do it in the Git book. I do prefer actually mounting these independently first. Sorry, mounting them here. So this one would mount right like that. But the Git book does recommend assembling it all like that. I'll also show this grommet just kind of pushes in place. So it's you just force it in there and wiggle it into place so that, there you go. See? So you kind of just work it around and it goes in place pretty easily. All right, so I'm going to put this on. And they do slide. Just take your time, and it'll slide in the. And I did have this on before, so we'll just take these silver screws that come. I think they're 2.5, I believe, or 2, and they hold whatever fits in these holes. All right, so. Hold that in place and screw it in place. And this rail is a nice standard size. I think it's 60 millimeter spacing center to center with a 10 millimeter diameter rod. So it lets you build things. You can 3D print a mount. We've done that for some of our other products, like there's a Rapid IoT adapter board that clips on here, and different camera systems or sensor systems can also go on there. The battery mounting bracket also goes on these rails, so it's quite handy having these rails as a place to hang things. Let's see, I don't think that's lined up. There we go. It does take a little bit of effort to get this lined up, and so I kind of cheated a little bit because it was on before. Let's see if I can get that. Even at that, it's hard to get it going. Okay. And there we have the rails mounted. You can see on the underside, lots of space to put things on. Next, we'll do the motor controllers, the ESCs. Next step, we're going to put on the motor controllers. So here they are, the ones that come in the kit. And they're basically all going to go on a diagonal like this and around equally in a circle with the motor, with these plugging in here to the power distribution board. We got to tuck it so that these wires get hidden up in underneath here. All right. So the first step is to get these double-sided tape in place. Now, what I did is I doubled up the double-sided tape so it's thicker, and that puts it about the right height to clear all the heads of the screws a bit better. So for positioning, we just see these little, the edges of these openings is kind of where I put this tape and push it up against that screw. And we'll just go around and install this in all the locations, each corner. Now that we have the tape in position and they're on the diagonal, what we'll do is, this is just one way of assembling it. We found it works pretty well. You might decide to assemble it some other way. You might find that you prefer having the motor controllers, zip tied out on the arms. I like this nice inboard and tidy. The drone looks really tidy when it's done. But you're welcome to try something else. This is only sticky tape and zip ties and whatnot, so let us know if there's some better way of doing this. Okay, motor controllers go on the diagonal. I kind of push it up against that side. I'm going to maybe try plugging one of these in first. So I'm going to plug positive and negative, and then just stick this down. So I'm kind of pushing it close to, not hard, but just up against the edge here. And these wires are going to need to tuck underneath when it's time to put the top plate on. All right, so we'll do that for the rest of them fairly quick. It does save a little bit of time if you plug them in as you're going around. There's a little bit of sliding wires underneath other wires and stuff that goes on. And the last one, so they're all going in the same direction. It's going to make it neater in the end. Okay, so there's the motor controllers installed. The front is this way. You see the little notch, I think, in the front of the board, perhaps. And these striped wires, the black and white striped wires, you just bring it to the back, because the back is where it's going to end up connecting up with the power flight management unit. In this section, we're just going to install the power module itself. What this does is provides the power for the flight management unit, and then it passes through the battery power, and while it's doing that, it's going to be able to measure the voltage and current of the battery, and that's the data that goes up to the flight management unit here. So nothing special about this. These are XT60 plugs. There's an XT60 plug on this power distribution board that we brought out the back side of the drone. So that's the back. Hopefully we can stay in focus. Back side of the drone, the little arrow is the front side. We brought out the back simply because of the way this is going to fold back over. Usually you want to insert the battery from the back, so we'll plug this in, and that'll let this power distribution module go up to the front, and then it'll go back down to where the battery is. All right. I don't have any zip ties handy right at the moment, but we would just zip tie this down. It's not critical. The actual power cable that goes up to the FMU, a few ways you could run it. I think I'm just going to put it right down through the center, and that way it'll come out the sides of the on the top plate. So very simple how to plug it in, and easy peasy. Now we'll move on to the next step. On the remote control receiver, this is the part that goes on the drone and receives the radio controlled signals. So you can see it's model FSIA6B that's provided with the kit. We want to make sure we're using the port marked iBus, which is also the same as S-Bus on our system. So it's actually a horizontal connection right there. I'll plug it in so you can see. There you can see it's plugged in with the white wire facing towards the top edge. Now we'll assemble the vibration dampening plate. It's pretty simple. There's holes in the, on this piece of standoff material, carbon fiber material. These little squishy rubber things, they're made of silicone. And you kind of have to fuss them in and get them, squeeze them into the holes and maybe pull it through to get them in position. There. So now we've got all 4 of them in. We have to do the same thing and get them into the holes here on the top plate. It's a little bit of work because they're off on an angle, but work at it gently and don't rip or tear the mounts, and you'll be fine. I'll pop these in and show you what it looks like. Okay, make sure they're in nice and tight. Wiggle it around, make sure it's secure, because you don't want this flying off during flight. You can see how they're kind of stretched out to the side too. Let's move on to the next step. So here are all the pieces that come in the kit, including a little bit of VHB tape. First step is we want to add this end piece to the end of this rod. All right, and all it does is you here there's two little tiny set screws, and this larger screw that goes through the rod in the base. All right, so there's on one side of this mount, there's a hole that goes right through, and there we go. And one side's threaded, so we just find the threaded side. The other side is a little bit bigger, so you should be able to see that. And put that mount in. It's hard to see because everything's black. But you're going to screw that all the way through. And now you've got a little piece that pivots. Okay. Use the carbon fiber rod and we'll mount that, we'll slide that in and add the little set screw. So you want to rotate the rod just to make sure that's all nice and tight. Okay. Now this is okay to be loose because at this point you want to put this cap on top and just slide it on over top here. You can even, as you tighten it, it makes the rod stiffen up. Okay, so you see that. Now we can take this top piece and put it on here. It also has a set screw. So we'll find the flat spot again on the carbon fiber rod and push that into place. And our last set screw here goes into this tiny little hole on the front. Wiggle that a little bit. All right. And then finally, we can take this VHB mounting tape and put it on the end here. Let's not stick the GPS on until we get this part mounted onto the frame. So we'll switch to that next. All right. So here's the mounting plate. Again, you can see that the front is marked with this notch. We're going to take these 4 screws. I think we'll only able to use 3 of them. You want to keep the other one just in case. But let's take 3 of them for now. And we want to mount this post on the right-hand side of the notch. And also, you want to see which way this folds down. So you want to make sure that it's going to fold down and be able to align with one of the arms. Okay, so imagine there's an arm coming out here. There's a nice little spot here that we found that seems to be good to mount it. So let's use that. Okay, so you can see there's these slots. And we can just put a screw in each one of these locations here and then center it in afterwards. Okay, now we can see there's a notch again, the notch at the front. And we were going to make sure that the GPS gets aligned here. We'll take off this tape and take our GPS with the arrow facing forward and make sure it's aligned as best you can with and centered as best you can with the front of the vehicle. Okay. And often what we do then is use a couple of zip ties to tie this down. This rod down, that cable. Okay, next step is we'll attach the telemetry radio. So this is a 2-way radio. One side is connected to your laptop, and the other goes on the drone. It doesn't matter which one, and depending on which country you're in, you'll have to make sure you're using either the 915 or the 433 megahertz radio. This cable lets you plug it one side into your laptop, and these cables that included in the box. One has the right JST, GH. I guess that won't focus. JST GH connector on that end. So start by plugging in the radio side. We don't need this cable, so we'll put that back. And we do it does seem to be nice to use this little right angle bracket. All right. So the antenna, we'll pull that little yellow piece off and set that aside. This antenna screws together. You can see screws on the end. Right, then you have this right angle thing, and also another bend that's possible. Okay, and we'll attach that onto the end of the radio here. Just tighten it up, not over tight. And we'll want to form it so that we can put this right about here on the base plate, and then tilt this antenna so that it's going to be facing downwards when we're ready to go. So I'm going to tilt that down so you can see it's kind of makes that right angle. It makes it quite tidy and neat. It does come with also some VHB tape, 3M tape in this case, I guess. Add that. Okay. Peel off the backing. There we go. All right. And again, this is the front. There's going to be an arm right here. So we want to add it just about there because the flight management controller will be there. So you'll be able to tilt that down, and the VHB tape will stick it on. You also have space here. There's a couple of little holes on either side if you want to add additional security by placing a zip tie to hold it in place. All right. The flight management controller is going to go on here, but we'll do that last. In this case, it just sticks on here. There's wires that'll come out the back for the ESCs, and then these other wires have to go and connect to it as well. For the PC side, you're going to take this side, add the antenna. You don't need to use this other bracket unless you have a need for it. Add the antenna. Maybe use some sticky tape to put it on the back of your laptop or tablet or something. And then this USB cable. This USB cable is an on-the-go, so it can work with a laptop, a cell phone, or a tablet. And plug one end in here. And after you install the drivers and everything, you'll be all set. Actually, drivers should get installed when you install Q ground control. Okay, now we're going to mount the top plate to the bottom plate. And here's the tricky part. We've got these little semicircle pieces that need to go together and make these circles that hold the arms. There's a few ways of doing this, and the tricky part is aligning it all. One option I like is we actually put these screws, these long screws, hex head screws, up from the bottom, and then slide the plastic pieces over top. All right, there's enough friction there to hold those in place while we get everything else ready. I know that's a little hard to see. All right, so we just repeat that for all the other locations. First, we're going to sort of slightly pre-assemble the motor arms. We're going to plug in these bullet connectors. And I wanted to point out, if you look in the Git book, there is an overview of the direction of the motor. So motor number 1 is a counterclockwise rotating motor. And you can tell if you've got the right one. First of all, it is the silver one, happens to be. But if you didn't know, what you can do is loosen it off so that the screw's loose, and then hold the screw, but turn the motor in a clockwise motion. And if the screw tightens, that's a clockwise motor. All right, so you know it's now tight. So and that's the whole point. I mean, you want these nuts to tighten down on the blades, or the blades that have integrated nuts to tighten down as the motor spins. All right, so at the moment now we're going to then take these plugs and plug them into the motor controllers down here. The order at this point doesn't matter. We'll correct any motors that are spinning in the wrong direction in one of the future steps here. Okay, so we've got our motor. What's nice, I just let it dangle down here on the side and put these wires through the hole. The motor arm is resting flat on the table. And then I'm going to take these wires and connect them to, actually not the ESC that's in front, not the ESC that's in front, but the one that's most convenient for the wires to route to, which actually is this one over here. So, and you just plug them in any order. Make sure they're in properly. So, and we can adjust the order later in order to ensure the right spinning direction of the motors. These wires here, when we close up the case, we'll just tuck them back underneath like that. So you might want to slide those underneath and all, okay, like that. So let's repeat that for the other motor arms. And again, we're taking careful note of the direction. So these are the clockwise rotating ESCs. Okay. Now that these are all attached, we'll put on the top plate. What's tricky here is just to get these holes lined up nicely with the screws. Take your time, and it'll be okay. I find if we get one corner started like that, and then we put a nut on to hold it in place, that helps. Just wiggle this, kind of pushing up from the bottom at the same time, that helps. Okay. Okay, now that these nuts are on loosely, what I'm going to do, first I want to show you the telemetry radio. We should twist this wire. It helps from an RF noise point of view, so if you can, just twist up this wire and as best you can, and we'll show that later. I'm going to tuck it in there a little bit. The GPS is going to go to the center here, and then in the back you can see these 4 wires. Bring those so that they come up through this little slot here. So I think you can see that. Right? So we're going to bring each of those 4 wires up through here. Just a little bit because the flight controller will be right in this section. Again, these should also be twisted. Okay, so you can see we've got these wires coming out the back. Now we'll take an arm and Oh, actually, okay, let's look at these. There's some little wires sticking out the side. That's from the ESCs. But we can sort of tuck those in, fold them in, loop them in on top of themselves. So that's out of the way. We'll do that all the way around. And now take an arm and let the excess wire should sort of bend up in there on the inside. Okay. And what you want to do is slide the arm in. This is really difficult to show. But slide the arm in so the end of this arm, the end of that arm is just barely touching the ESC that's in front of it. You know, it should clear. It should clear, go a little bit past these two last nuts. All right. So I'm going to put that in there and then just snug it up for now, not overly tight. Okay. And with these sorts of nuts, you want to just don't over-tighten one side before getting the other one tight at all. Just keep snugging them up, each one a little bit at a time. And you'll be able to see eventually, like right now, it's still loose enough that I can turn. But eventually, you want to make sure, you know, kind of eyeball this so that it's pointing straight up. Check to make sure, look in here to make sure that you've got enough past those two clamp pieces. And then tighten it up. And actually, before we finish tightening this, let's get the other ones in place and snugged up. All right. We're complete. We've got all four arms on. These cables are fed through the back. The radio cable is going to be here on the side. On the underside is where the power module and the telemetry, the RC remote radio will go. So let's just tidy that up, and then we'll put out the FMU on top and connect up all the remaining wires. All right, now I'm just going to show you how to assemble the FMU. It's really simple. You know, it's just a circuit board. One little detail is there is a separate piece that's the reset switch right in here. It has to be pushed in this little catch area, and you want to be just careful with that. And at the same time, once it is in place, take a moment just to push it back and forth and make sure it's loose. The opening next to it is for the USB port. So again, on the circuit board, it may have these little Kapton tape covers from manufacturing. Peel off the ones you want to. They're easy to peel off also after it's assembled. I like to just leave the tape on the ones that are not being used yet. So you may have 2 or 4 screws here to hold this in place. it's a good idea to put at least one in. I'd like to put two in. That just holds the board in place. They don't have to be tight. Good time also to check your reset switch to make sure that's working. And it's popping back out. You should feel a little click. And then the top cover, very simple, goes on top. You may wish to put the sticker on first and align to make sure it's aligned with the cutout and holes. You might find it easier that way. Again, there's the clamshell design. And it pops over quite easily. You might want to make sure that there's no SD card inserted on the board while you're doing this assembly. And this is a pre-production case, so it's a little bit rougher than what you'll see. Finally, add the screws in the 4 screws in the back to hold it all together. I believe your screws will be socket head cap screws as well, so that you can use the hex Allen wrenches that are provided in the kit. All right, and there you have it. That's the case enclosed. There's a spot in the front for the SD card. Your PWM outputs are in the back here. And these connectors are all well explained in the Git book. I can tell you power is up front. That's the GPS. That's the radio, and then telemetry is over here. Now we've got all these cables up at the top, the 4 servos, the 4 ESCs, the power module, GPS, and telemetry radio. Let's first mount the flight controller. This is one, I'm sorry I don't have a label on it, but this is one of the early prototypes, but it'll do for now. I'm going to put some adhesive, some double-sided foam tape on the mount. You may want to use more than this. All right. And center, again, notch here shows the notch here shows forward. Right there, I don't know if you can see it. A little hard to show. That notch shows forward, and we're going to mount this with the sloping edge forward. And the RC connections in the back. So look down from the top and just kind of center this as best you can on the mounting plate. Okay. So you'll be able to refer to the Git book. The power module connects in the front. The GPS here connects to this large 10-pin connector. Telemetry here on the side. And the RC remote plugs in behind there. So follow the Git book instructions in order to do that. What I'm going to focus on is the remote control, the RC remote control cabling. All right. What I'm going to focus on here is this RC remote control cabling. And ideally, you've tracked which motor is attached to which cable. But in reality, you're going to forget or not know. So what we can do instead is we connect them to the first four positions of the motor controller, of the FMU. You plug the ESCs into the first 4 PWM output connections. And then we'll be able to do a software test in order to make sure they're the right ones. All right? So for now, you can just do this and then push this wiring back in a little bit so it's neat and tidy. All right, I just want to show you the bottom here where we've got the RC remote radio is mounted here with this wire, the S-bus or I-bus servo wire that's going up to the top. It's fed through. And then I've got the power cable here that is all underneath this battery holder. And it's connected to this little power module. All right. So again, and the wires are fed up from the bottom all the way to the top here. So there's the battery cable. And on the bottom, you can, once that's done, you can move over this battery holder and just kind of push it in so it clips onto the rails. Probably not the best way to do it, but if you squeeze gently, you can get it to clip in place. All right.